Good morning, all my friends at the Valley Beshalom ECC. It's Rabbi Hoffman, and it's my pleasure to tell you a story as this Shabbat begins. So you see, I'm all dressed up in my whites, and I have got everything all cleaned up. Look at our house, it's all clean and ready for Shabbat. And before Shabbat begins, we have a story. Would you like to hear a story? Well, everybody gather around, take your seats, and come close because I have a great story to share. And my story today is a wonderful story that takes place all the way back in the time when Bnei Yisrael was traveling from Egypt all the way to the land of Israel. You know, it was a long journey. It took 40 years. Boy, that's a long time. And throughout that journey, they had all kinds of things that they had to do. Like they had to learn how to live with each other, and they had to learn how to take care of the community and the environment around them. And they also had to learn how to eat. And you know what? They had all kinds of great ideas of how to eat, including making bread. And one of the ways that people made bread way back when, in the time when they were traveling through the desert, was they used to have very big animals, oxen, who would go around and around in a circle and would grind up the wheat that they had harvested and turned it into flour. Well, Miriam was in charge of all of those things. She was called the Chief Program Officer. And it's really great to tell a story about Miriam because Mother's Day is happening this weekend, and Miriam was like the great mom of all of the Israelites as they were journeying through the desert. And you know, Miriam had a lot of qualifications. She was the woman who saved her brother Moshe when he was floating down the river. And she was the one that brought the people together when it was time to leave Egypt and go on their way to freedom. And Miriam's best contribution, which made her the chief programming officer, was when they made it to the other side of the sea, and when they saw the waters come back, they danced and they rejoiced, and Miriam was in the lead. So Miriam had a very important position. And Miriam was busy all day making sure that the program of the community was happening exactly the way that it was organized to be. And she didn't have any time to listen to kids. That was well and good. Listening to kids, maybe not so good. And this is a story when that changed. Because one day they were busy doing things like making food, making bread, and the oxen who were working hard at grinding up the wheat and turning it into flour was creating something most terrible. So what happened was the women of the community came up to Miriam and they said, "Here, smell this." And Miriam took a loaf of bread and she brought it close to her and she, "Ew, yuck, what is that smell?" And the women with the arms on their sides, they said, "Exactly, that is ox drool." "Ox drool?" Miriam said. "Let us show you." And the women grabbed Miriam and they went over to Fred, who was taking care of the ox, who happened to also be known as Fred. So we'll call Two-Legged Fred the owner of Four-Legged Fred the ox. And they went to Two-Legged Fred and they said, "Fred, what's going on? This bread is horrible. It's filled with this yucky smell. It's like ox drool. Gross." Fred said, "I don't know. All I know is that Four-Legged Fred works very hard throughout the day. And you know what ox do when they are very, very hot and sweaty? Well, they don't sweat like you and me. They sweat through their drool." So Four-Legged Fred would go around the circle, "Ooka-chaka, ooka-chaka, ooka-chaka, ooh." And every time it would get a little bit hotter, the drool started to come out. "Ooka-chaka, ooka-chaka, ooka-chaka, slosh." "The problem," said Miriam. And the women all nodded their head and they said, "You've got to fix this, Miriam." So Miriam said, "Two-Legged Fred, why don't you stop this ox from drooling?" And Fred said, "I can't do that because that's what the ox needs in order to stay healthy." So Miriam said, "Figure out a solution." Well, before Fred figured that out, Miriam had a daughter. Her name was Elisheva. And Elisheva was tugging on Miriam's coat and saying, "Ima, Ima, I think I know what we can do." And Miriam said, no, 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 no. This is very important work of the chief programming officer. No kids are allowed to make decisions. And Elisheva just lowered her head and frowned. Well, Two-Legged Fred came up with an idea. He thought, what if we put a bib around Four-Legged Fred, and that way we'll catch all the drool. Well, sure enough, they put on a bib, and Four-Legged Fred went around the circle. Oh, ka-chaka, oh, ka-chaka, oh, ka-chaka, oh. And the drool started to come, and it fell out of the bib, and it was back into the flour and more yucky bread. So then they thought, what if we put an umbrella underneath Four-Legged Fred's mouth so they can catch even more drool? And that seemed to work really fine until all of a sudden the umbrella just filled up with more and more and more of that yucky, sweaty stuff. Oh, ka-chaka, slasha, 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 slasha. Oh, what a terrible, terrible mess they were in. So then they came up with another idea. What if we fan Four-Legged Fred? Fan him, and that way, when he gets hot, he'll be cool and he won't drool so much. Well, they tried that. Oh, ka-chaka, oh, ka-chaka, oh, ka-chaka, slasha, 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 and that didn't work either. Elisheva came back up to Miriam. Ima, I've got a good idea, please, please. And Miriam said, no, Elisheva, you cannot help me right now. I am so busy trying to help see this problem of the bread. If we have ox drool flavored bread, nobody's gonna eat bread and everybody's gonna be really hungry and not have dinner. Elisheva was so upset because she was trying to share her idea and she wasn't being heard by her Ima. So she ran off and she went to a rock just outside the camp and she was crying. And Miriam saw that Elisheva was crying on the rock and she went down and she sat next to her. And she tried to console Elisheva and Miriam said, what's wrong, sweetheart? I had an idea and you wouldn't listen to me. Miriam said, well, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you upset. Why don't you tell me your idea? And then we'll see what we can do about it. And Miriam listened carefully as Elisheva finished her tears and said, what if we have Four-Legged Fred grind the flour at night? And Miriam lit up. She was bright and she said, that's a brilliant idea. Oh, I thank you, Elisheva. You had just the right idea. I'm so thankful. I'm so sorry that I wasn't listening to you. You know what? I'm going to tell Two-Legged Fred, and I'm going to help Four-Legged Fred, and I'm going to tell all the women that the next loaf of bread that they make will be without drool because they will have ground the wheat into flour at night. Elisheva was happy, and Miriam was happy. And sure enough, they tested it out, and Four-Legged Fred did his grinding at night. Oh, ka-chaka, oh, ka-chaka, oh, ka-chaka, oh. Help me out. Oh, ka-chaka, oh, ka-chaka, oh, ka-chaka, oh. One more time. Oh, ka-chaka, oh, ka-chaka, oh, ka-chaka, oh. And it worked. The flour was made without any of the ox drool because the ox wasn't sweaty because it was nice and cool at night. Well, everybody was so happy with this incredible solution to the problem that Miriam came up with. Miriam, you're so wise. Miriam, you're so smart, and you've always saved us. Let's dance in celebration. And Miriam said, wait. I can't claim the credit for this. This idea came from my daughter, Elisheva. And I want to say to everyone that when sometimes we're so busy with all of our plans and trying to do everything for our families, sometimes we have to listen to our children too. Well, everybody thought that that was the best idea. And Two-Legged Fred was really happy because he didn't have to put a muzzle on Four-Legged Fred. And Four-Legged Fred was happy because he wasn't grinding all that wheat into flour with all of his ox drool spilling all over the place. And all the moms were happy because they got to make the bread. And Miriam was happy because the solution was reached. And Elisheva was happy because she was heard. So Elisheva came back to her mom and she said, Ima, can we have chocolate milk for every meal? And Miriam laughed That was an idea, that's for sure. And while Miriam said, I probably can't say yes to that idea, but I will definitely listen. That was how Miriam became a better listener, and how the people learned to listen to each other, and how we celebrate our moms for being wise and understanding and listening to us. So make sure that you say thanks to your mom today and this weekend for being such a great listener. And if you ever have to make some bread, may it never be filled with oxtail. Shabbat shalom, everyone. Take care.